Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Apologize for the late start this evening. Thank you for being here. If you'll please rise. Chief Lonzo Wallace will lead us in an invocation, and Ms. Haley Capps will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Chief.
Please bow your head and join me in prayer. Father, we come to you today thanking you for allowing us to have this National Day of Prayer. Father, we want to thank you for allowing us to gather here to conduct the business of the city. Father, it's just great to be in a land where we can have prayer, the freedom to pray and to worship as you allow us to do here in this country. Father, we ask that you just bless all of those that come in harm's way, our military people, the firefighters, police officers, all of those that are out trying to do the business that you would have us to do to protect the citizens. Lord, we just ask that you watch over this council as they conduct the business that's before them here tonight. Give us the guidance and the strength to do those things that you would have us to do. We ask all things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Haley. Chief, thank you for that prayer, sir. We have a number of proclamations and recognitions this evening. We'll start off with inviting Mr. Willie Capps with Elks Lodge number 138 to come forward, please. And we have a presentation for you. Welcome. Whereas the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks has designated the week beginning May 1st as Youth Week to honor America's junior citizens for their accomplishments and to give fitting recognition for their services to community, state, and nation. Whereas Temple Elks Lodge number 138 will sponsor an observance during that week in tribute to the junior citizens of this community. Whereas no event could be more deserving of our support and participation than the one dedicated to those young people who represent the nation's greatest resource, and who in the years ahead will assume the responsibility for advancement of our free society. Whereas our youth need the guidance, inspiration, and encouragement which we alone can give in order to help develop those qualities of character essential for future leadership. And whereas to achieve this worthy objective, we should demonstrate our partnership with youth, our understanding of their hopes and aspirations, and a sincere willingness to help prepare them in every way for the responsibilities and opportunities of citizenship. Now therefore I, William A. Jones III, Mayor of the City, do hereby proclaim the week of May 5th through 9th, 2008 as Youth Week in the city of Temple, Texas. And I encourage all citizens to honor the youth in our community by expressing appreciation to them for their accomplishments and to let them know that we are proud of them. In testimony whereof I witness my hand in the seal of the city of Temple, Texas, this first day of May of 2008. Willie, thanks to you and all the Elks for all you do for our youth. You want to tell us a little bit about some of the events you have this week?
I'm Willie Capps. I'm currently the Loyal Knight. I'm also a past president of the Temple Lodge. Tonight at our Lodge meeting, we will be honoring 6 Eagle Scouts, 5 Girl Scouts, 3 youth from our school who placed in the state competition for the coloring contest. We had 2 first and a second for drug awareness coloring. Coming up on the 17th of May, we have a fishing derby out here at Miller Park, along with Joanne McKeska Realty and a couple other people who do a fishing derby and a bike rodeo. On the 18th, we have our soccer shootout for 14 and under, all the way down. My youngest competitor has been 3 years old in our soccer shootout. We're very active in our community. We support our youth. We also support our veterans. Also tonight, we will be receiving the Medal of Valor, the Elks National Medal of Valor, to a local soldier who was killed in Iraq in September, to his family. We do a lot for the community, and we continue to do a lot for the community. And thank you for your proclamation, Mayor. And kids, come out to the fishing.
Our next proclamation we present to a couple that is no stranger to us. We spent a little time with them in a workshop here not too long ago. If I can ask Drs. Robin and Pat Smith to come forward and allow us to present a proclamation to them for a very special day coming up on May the 10th. And it's not an election day. Even though it is, it's not affiliated with Election Day. From the Office of the Mayor, City of Temple. Whereas the City of Temple is honored to recognize the Temple CPR Task Force and its vision to facilitate CPR for training 10% of the Temple population, which is approximately 6,000 people. Whereas on May the 10th, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Temple Mall, the Temple CPR Task Force will be providing information on heart health issues and will be demonstrating and distributing at-home CPR kits at $15 per kit, which is one-half the normal price. Whereas families will be asked to commit to training at least 4 family members and friends using the kit in exchange for receiving the kit at a significantly reduced rate. And whereas we desire to express appreciation to the Temple CPR Task Force for the invaluable service it performs in its efforts to educate as many people as possible about the life-saving function of CPR, which can double a victim's chance of survival. And now, therefore, I, William A. Jones III, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, do hereby proclaim Saturday, May 10th, 2008, as Temple Save a Life Day in the City of Temple, Texas. And I encourage all citizens to attend the Saturday, May 10th Save a Life event at the Temple Mall and to learn CPR by taking advantage of this outstanding opportunity to take home a CPR Anytime for Families and Friends kit. In testimony whereof I witness my hand and the seal of the City of Temple, Texas, this first day of May of 2008. Robin and Pat, thank you very much again for your leadership in this great effort for our community. Anything else you'd like to add about the event?
Of course.
You never miss an opportunity, Professor.
Once a teacher, always a teacher.
Absolutely.
For those in the audience here who don't know CPR, learn it. You can do that and teach it to your family. You can teach 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people CPR for the first time at home in under 30 minutes using this kit. And thanks to the very generous contributions of many major organizations here in Temple, you're able to get that at under the cost that normal is. So we're going to be distributing those for $15 each. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, and you owe it to your mothers, because that's Mother's Day weekend, to make sure that you do the things in your family to preserve the life and save lives in the case of sudden cardiac arrest. Thank you.
Our next recognition will be presented by Mayor Pro Tem Patsy Lunez to recognize Keep Temple Beautiful for receiving the Governor's Community Achievement Sustained Excellence Award from Keep Texas Beautiful. Mr. Dan Jones here this evening to receive this proclamation on behalf of the KTV Board of Directors. Welcome, Dan.
I want to present this proclamation. Whereas Keep Temple Beautiful is dedicated to the study, investigation, and development of plans for improving the health, sanitation, safety, and cleanliness of the City of Temple. Whereas in 2006, Keep Temple Beautiful won the Governor's Community Achievement Award, $130,000 for use on First Street, even though they are not eligible to win that award again until 2009. They recently received the Governor's Community Achievement Sustained Excellent Award from Keep Texas Beautiful that is given for high scores to keep affiliates working hard in the years in between. Whereas for 2007, out of a possible 100 points, Keep Temple Beautiful scored 98.67, a full point higher than their winning score in 2006. And whereas we are honored to recognize this outstanding accomplishment and to express heartfelt appreciation to those who contribute to the continued success of Keep Temple Beautiful. Now, therefore, I, for the Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, do hereby recognize Keep Temple Beautiful for the outstanding accomplishment of receiving the Governor's Community Achievement Sustained Excellent Award from Keep Texas Beautiful, and I encourage all citizens to join together in expressing deep appreciation to all those who contribute to the continued success of Keep Temple Beautiful. In testimony whereof, I witness my hand and the seal of the city of Temple, Texas, this the first day of May 2008, and it's signed William A. Jones III, Mayor of the city of Temple.
All right, there you go.
I do want to just say for Thomas Baird and Zoe Rasco, who asked me to come and take this to them today, that they wanted me to pass our thanks from the Keep Temple Beautiful Board to the city and all of the organizations who have helped support this group. We think that it's a good cause, and obviously the support from the city does too, and we really appreciate it. And it was a very, very big honor to receive this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. And thanks, relatively new board member, and you've jumped right in and been very active already. And we appreciate your participation on the KTB board. Thank you. Next, we're going to recognize a couple ladies for some really significant work in our community. Let me ask Donna Tomlinson and Vicki Carpenter with the Public Affairs Office of Time Warner Cable, and ask Mary Ann Garrett and Diana Acosta to please come forward. How are you? Nice to see you. We're going to recognize these two ladies. They're recipients of the 2008 Hometown Hero Award. Mary Ann received that recognition, and Deanna is a recipient of the Rising Hero Student of 2008. And I'm going to read a little bit in the form of a proclamation, but it tells about their achievements and accomplishments. So, whereas the City of Temple is greatly honored to recognize Mary Ann Garrett as a recipient of the 2008 Hometown Hero Award, which is sponsored by Time Warner Cable, Baylor University Athletics, and Fox Sports, and presented to outstanding nominees who demonstrate volunteerism and commitment to their community. Whereas Mary Ann has given unselfishly of her time and talents to inspire numerous young people in the Temple community. Through her volunteer work with the Temple ISD Communities and Schools program, she has created step dance programs at Ray Allen and Meredith Dunbar Elementary Schools and Travis Middle School. Her program encourages students to become young volunteers and to use their talents to serve and make an impact in the community. Whereas in addition to working with the schools, Mary Ann created a community youth program which is open to all children of all ages that meets weekly at the Wilson Park Recreation Center. She brings in motivational speakers, police officers, members of the military, including veterans of war, to talk to the children. And whereas Mary Ann Garrett is truly a remarkably gifted individual who is most deserving of this prestigious award and our recognition. And now therefore I, William A. Jones III, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, do hereby recognize Mary Ann Garrett as the recipient of the 2008 Hometown Hero Award, and I encourage all citizens to express their heartfelt appreciation to Mary Ann for her dedication to serving the youth in our community. In testimony whereof, I witness my hand in the seal of the City of Temple, Texas, and proudly present this proclamation to Mary Ann Garrett on this, the first day of May of 2008. Thank you very much. You want to say something now? You want me to present to Deanna and then you can talk about it? Okay, great. Our next recognized individual is a student at Temple High School. We just had the privilege of getting to recognize her the other night as one of the top 50 graduates of Temple High School. And she is a graduating senior here in about 30 days, a little less. And so, Diana Acosta, we recognize you. Whereas the City of Temple is greatly honored to recognize Temple High School senior Diana Acosta as the recipient of the Rising Heroes Student of 2008, which is sponsored by Time Warner Cable, Baylor University Athletics, and Fox Sports, and presented to outstanding nominees who demonstrate volunteerism and commitment to their community. Whereas, for the past 4 years, Deanna has volunteered her time in the ESL, English as a Second Language program, at First Baptist Church of Temple. She works weekly in the program by translating English volunteers serving the ESL clients. Whereas Deanna's volunteer commitment has been a blessing to our community, helping families to learn the English language and to make an easier transition to this country. In addition to her dedicated efforts in the ESL program, Deanna has placed first in the Regional Science Fair, was honored as an Excellence in Life student, is a National Hispanic Recognized Student, and ranks in the top 1% of her senior class. And whereas Deanna Acosta is truly an outstanding, determined young lady who is most deserving of this prestigious award and our recognition. Now therefore I, William A. Jones III, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, do hereby recognize Deanna Acosta as the recipient of the Rising Hero Student of 2008, and I encourage all citizens to express heartfelt appreciation to Deanna for her dedication to serving others through volunteerism and to wish her the very best in the future. In testimony whereof I witness my hand and the seal of the City of Temple, Texas, on this first day of May of 2008. Congratulations.
I just wanted to give y'all just a little background on this program. This program started 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, with Baylor and Fox to honor our unsung heroes, because they usually are behind the scenes. They don't necessarily, they're not there for the recognition. We know that. They've done great things for this community, and so we're very proud to be here. We honored them last week at a banquet, and we are actually going to be donating $1,000 to communities and schools, and then $500 to Deanna's First Baptist Church of Temple for the ESL program. And then we also presented Deanna with a $3,000 scholarship for her for college for next year. So I want to encourage y'all, this will come out again in 2009. We'll be sending them out to nonprofit organizations in the area to, honor your unsung heroes and send in those nominations. So, thank you. Thank you for recognizing them here.
Thank you very much. If you have not seen Mary Ann work with her kids and seen them perform the steppers, you need to do that. You will be in for a treat. And she runs a pretty tough ship with those kids, and she demands a lot from them. She gets a lot, and she sets high expectations for them, and they will benefit from that for a long time. So thank you, Mary Ann, for all you do, and we look forward to your continued work in that area. So thanks. Bless you. Next on our agenda is to receive a presentation regarding the city's emergency outdoor warning sirens from Chief Lonzo Wallace. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to come in to make this presentation. First, we'll just pull up the start with the outdoor warning siren. The City of Temple Emergency Management and Outdoor Warning Siren System that we currently have. The Emergency Management Plan, the Annex A, is the warning annex for the city. The purpose of the annex is to outline the organization and the operational concepts, the responsibilities and the procedures to disseminate timely and accurate information about warning the public and the government officials in the event of an impending emergency situation. The situation and the assumptions is that the emergency situations can occur at any time. The electronic media is the primary source of emergency information to the general public. Also, the concept of operation, the local warning point, or the LPW for the City of Temple, is at Central Fire Station, or it is at the Emergency Operations Center, which is here at City Hall. Also, the local warning point receives warnings of the actual or potential emergency situation from various sources, the federal and state agencies, local officials, businesses, industries, the media, and the general public. Also, the local warning point will verify any of the warning information that comes in where it's necessary, and disseminate that pertinent information to any specific local officials and any departments. Certain types of time-sensitive warnings, the local warning point may be authorized to activate the local warning system at the point that they feel it's necessary to set off the warning sirens. Also, receiving the warnings that come in from the National Weather Service about floods or flood watches and warnings, severe weather, or tornado watches or warnings, and any tropical weather watches and warning that will come in. Those are the types of warnings that are received in the Emergency Operations Center. The NOAA weather radios, they're also located at the Bell County Communications Center that we receive information from also. Notification of the local officials is that the emergency notification, there's a matrix in the Annex A that in Appendix 2 that indicates who should be notified based on the situation that we're dealing with. The notifications will be made by telephone, radio, pagers, or any other means that are available to get the notifications out. Also, the dissemination of the warning to the public about the outdoor warning system is there are 22 sirens that are located throughout the city, and we have a board that's over on the side that you're welcome to look at after the presentation is over. And these 22 sirens, they cover 95% of the city's geographic area. It covers approximately 98% of the population in the city. And the sirens are for, it's an alerting device, an outdoor alerting device. And when it's activated, the public should turn on the radios or the TVs to get additional information about what that current emergency might be. We have the locations of the sirens that are located on the board for you to take a look at. And again, we have the map. And if you could put that map up on the board, Alan. That's the map for the coverage of the city. So that is pretty much the general outline of the coverage that we have for the city with our outdoor warning sirens and how we operate the sirens. Are there any questions?
If you have to initiate the sirens, do they all have to be initiated, or can you just initiate a portion of them?
We can initiate just a portion of them. If we have an emergency that's just pertained to a particular area, we can activate individual sirens, or we can activate all of the sirens.
Okay, thank you.
One other point is that the sirens are tested the first Saturday of each month at 11 o'clock for 1 minute. If it's a clear day. If it's a cloudy day or threatening weather, we won't set the sirens off.
Please say that again.
The sirens are tested the first Saturday of each month at 11 o'clock.
Okay.
For
That was what I was
1
going to
minute.
ask you, because used to you could set your watch on a Saturday at 11 when you're outside working, because they would go off. I mean, literally, you would know it was 11 o'clock. You'd start getting hungry. But now it's only once a month.
It's once a month. Yes, it's once a month. Okay.
At what point does the sirens go off? A warning or a watch?
A warning. They'll go off on a warning. And the thing is that we don't want to get to a point where we're just more or less crying wolf. So we trace the weather as it's coming in, and we'll take a look at the conditions and things like that, and then we'll make the decision to set the sirens off or not.
So it's not automatic. Even if a warning is called, it's not automatic that we're going to set a siren off. There's still human intervention. There's a conscious decision made. Is the weather threatening enough? Is it imminent that it's of great concern to the citizens?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And we've had incidents in the last 3 weeks or thereabouts in which we've gone both ways.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Last week.
Last week we sounded them, but then 3 weeks ago on a Thursday morning, about 4 in the morning, we had a tornado warning, but it was assessed evidently. You can explain that situation, Chief, if you would.
We were tracking that storm as it was coming through, and at the point that the deputy chief that was on duty had actually turned the key to start the activation of the sirens as he was watching, and the storm start to track more on the south of us, and not it was through the Belton area and not to Temple. And as I started to watch the storm, the way it was tracking, it was a fast-moving storm. But then the storm actually ended up, the part that came on the north side actually just kind of developed over us. And by the time that we looked at it, it was actually north, on the north side of the city. So that was the situation with that, and all as we were trying to determine whether to set those sirens off or not. And, we're fortunate we did not have a confirmed touchdown of a tornado or anything.
Other questions, Councilor? Comments, David?
Just offer a couple of comments and ask the Chief to comment on it also. One is just highlight again what we would encourage people to do if they do hear the sirens.
Great. What we encourage people to do if you hear the sirens is to go inside, turn on your radio or your TV, get additional information about what's going on while those sirens are being sounded, and again, that's one of the best ways to get the information is through the media, and we try to monitor those different situations and all that are out there. But the idea is not for them to leave cover, it's for them to go in and take cover. There are outdoor warning sirens. If we have events going on in the city, out in our parks and outdoor activities going on, those people are to go inside and to take cover.
And then just a follow-up comment on that, and just to highlight what the Chief just indicated, the sirens are intended to be a tool or an aid for those folks that are already outside. They are not intended to be a substitute for what residents ought to be doing when they perceive or think that there might be severe weather in the area. And I would encourage them to do just what our emergency personnel do, and that's watch the TV and listen to the radio, look at the radar. That's exactly what the emergency personnel, management personnel are doing. That's what we would encourage folks to do, and then underscore what the Chief said. We don't encourage folks to go outside to listen for the sirens if there is threatening weather in the area. That is not the point of the sirens, and they should not be viewed in that manner. It is solely intended as an aid for those that are already outdoors and maybe away from media outlets to help them, alert them to perhaps a warning that might have been issued. Thank you, Mayor.
Chief, in the evenings when people are asleep, do you recommend that those radios that go off with the weather warnings?
Yes, we do. We strongly recommend those NOAA radios, and they have the radios now that they're programmable, that you can program it for the area that you're in. You can program it for Bell County, or you can program it to cover surrounding counties as the storm may be tracking coming into the city. Matter of fact, we have purchased some of those NOAA radios for the fire stations so that we can have the individual stations be alerted to what's going on also, so that we can continue to monitor throughout the night,
Other questions? Thank you, Council. Chief, thank you very much, sir, for that presentation.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is an opportunity for public comment. Citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may sign up to do so prior to the meeting. Public comments will be received during this portion of the meeting. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. No discussion or final action will be taken by the council after your comments. We have 2 folks signed up to speak this evening. First, Sylvia Odewald is signed up. Ms. Odewald, you're signed up relative to an item that will have a public hearing. in which you'll be given an opportunity to speak if you wish, but it'll be, well, it shouldn't be too terribly late or long in the meeting. If you would like to make comments now, you may, but otherwise you will be able to in the public hearing. You want to wait? Okay. Thank you, ma'am. And the next person we have signed up to speak tonight is Miss Patty Elliott. Miss Elliott?
Good evening, Mayor, council members, all. Well, I came tonight to talk about the sirens. When they used to be, I live in the north side, it used to be at Lamar School. All of a sudden, I didn't hear them for quite a while, and I thought, well, what's wrong? So I called the mayor proceeding. He says, oh, I hear them every Saturday. What's wrong? You don't hear them? Are you outside? What? I said, no, I just haven't heard them, and I used to hear them. He said, well, I hear them every Saturday. I said, okay, thank you very much. So I thought, okay, I'll call Jack Morris. I said, I understand that the siren is at Lamar School, but I haven't heard it lately. And he said, well, no wonder. He said they've been ordering parts for months on that. It hadn't worked. I thought, oh, thank goodness I'm not crazy. But I have not heard these new sirens either. And I think that as it goes, that's, as I understand it and have read about it, that it's mostly for the people that are outside to come in and take shelter. Well, I'm not a meteorologist. I've lived in Tornado Alley all my life. But I know that usually at supper time or dinner, whichever you call it, or at night time is when the worst storms usually hit. And I think the sirens ought to be loud enough. Well, let's see. I got ahead of myself there. No, at night usually they hit, but usually I'm inside in a bed in my house. I don't hear those sirens. I think that they ought to be loud enough where everybody can hear them, inside as well as out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Elliott. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, item 6. All items listed under this section, consent agenda, are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If desired by the council, any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any council member, and it will be considered separately. This is item 6, A through X. Are there items, council, that you wish to be removed, or staff? Are there any items that you wish to have removed for any particular reason?
I'd like to pull item T, as in Tony.
Okay. Item 6T, Ms. Blackman?
Yep.
F, item 6F to be removed, okay. Other items? If not, I'll entertain a motion on items 6A through X, excluding items 6F and 6T.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented, less items F and T.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Janczak. Mayor Pro Tem, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jennings?
Aye.
Councilmember Janczak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider? Aye. Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 6F is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing a construction contract with Global Mobile Recovery of Carrollton for the replacement of 12 air conditioning units at the Public Services building in the amount of $67,347.88 and declare an official intent to reimburse this expenditure prior to the issuance of tax-exempt obligations for this project. Mr. Blackman?
Mayor, I appreciate the council's pulling the item for separate consideration. Since the preparation of this item, the scope of the work that is contained within that item, or the subject of that item, has changed, and our recommendation, staff recommendation, is that you reject these bids, and then we'll rebid the process.
Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. That being the case, is there a motion to reject all bids on item 6F?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second to reject all bids on item 6F regarding the air conditioning units for the Public Services Building. Is there further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Item 6T is to consider adopting a resolution allowing for a 5% local preference on all formal bids over $25,000 where applicable by law. Would you like a presentation on this item, Mr. Jeter?
I just think this item warrants a little presentation to the community. We're going to change the way we do business in that respect.
Ms. Mackey, would you present this?
Mayor and Council, what's before you tonight is a recommendation to increase or expand our local preference policy. Basically, back in 1999, the state allowed for municipalities to implement a local preference, that being at that time 3%. If you had a bid come in and a local vendor had a storefront in the city of Temple and they could show economic benefit to awarding the bid to them within 3%, you could make the choice to award that bid to the local vendor versus somebody maybe from out of town. What has changed in the law is that it's actually expanded. In 2005, they enacted or gave us the flexibility to increase that preference to 5%, but and the other thing it did, it expanded the scope of it. In 1999, when they implemented it, basically was equipment, and that's what you could apply it to. You couldn't apply it to construction contracts or any type of service contract at all. And so now what they've allowed us to do is they've opened it up to 5% preference, and they've also opened it up to include service contracts. So what we're doing or asking you to do or consider is to expand the scope as allowed by law to basically a 5% preference, and also not only equipment but to expand it to services. I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Construction contracts and services.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything related to service, and then the service falls into the construction contract.
But does that include professional services?
Does not include professional services because they are fall
Different project.
under right professional services guidelines.
Okay. Great. Council, question?
And there's no limit. Nothing. I mean, it could be any amount.
Could be any amount. Could be a small contract, anything like right at $25,000, or it could be a multi-million-dollar contract. And just because we change this policy, it's not that we have to go with the local vendor, but it gives us the opportunity to evaluate that to see if there is economic benefit to our community.
And will that be a part of the bid? Will that change the bid process that when a local vendor is bidding, they will make a statement saying the number of jobs employed and all that other kind of stuff?
They will need to give us some justification. Currently, in our local preference for equipment, they basically have to check a box saying that, and we're going to expand that a little bit, where they'll need to explain to us as to how it's going to benefit our community.
To keep the dollars with a
Local, that's correct.
And that's done beforehand. Bids are still, doesn't have any impact on how the bids are done. Bids are still sealed and all that stuff.
That is correct. The only thing it does need to be acknowledged as part of the bid process in the bid document. So all the bidders are aware of that.
Can you explain to the audience what the term leakage means with in relationship to bids being awarded to out-of-town contractors?
Not sure I understand exactly what your question,
Okay. Well, I'll jump in. The comprehensive plan folks talked about it, and we'll see more of that, but that's when the money goes to another community instead of in Temple, Texas, and so it pays for jobs and payroll and benefits in other locations other than Temple, Texas.
That is correct.
And so it's in our benefit to keep those dollars here locally.
That's correct.
In essence, Mr. Mayor, if I can, I'll add or supplement that. I concur with the explanation, but it's an attempt and an effort to recognize that the dollars turn over in the community, and that if you invest those dollars, reinvest those dollars in the community, that they also have a multiplying effect in the community also, and that's also a good thing. I was just going to add also that the items coming forward to you, this is not the first time council's had or heard the presentation or the discussion related to this. Council did have a briefing and a workshop discussion on this item previously, and recommendation in the item that you see here is also concurs or is coming forward with Miles's recommendation to consider it favorably also.
Thank you, Mr. Blackman. Ms. Manning, thank you very much. Other questions, council? There being none, entertain a motion on item 6T.
So moved.
Second.
I assume that's a motion for approval and a second. That being the case, we have a motion and a second for approval of the 5% local preference and expansion to construction contracts and services. There's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Janczak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 7 is a first reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance amending the tax increment financing reinvestment zone number 1 financing plan for fiscal year 2008 through 22 to include redesignation of projects within the project plan, bond proceeds, and the future year bond payments. Ms. Bernard.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. As mentioned tonight, this is the first reading of an ordinance amending the financing plan. To give you a brief history, on February 21st, 2008, an amendment was presented and approved by Council, and the focus of that amendment was to amend the financing plan to include bond issuance for multiple projects within the reinvestment zone, develop several parks, provide infrastructure to the Gulf States Toyota site, and a focus to have shovel-ready sites available. Subsequent to that, on March 20th, Council awarded the sale of $16,010 worth of bonds. Those bonds excluded any improvement dollars for railroad improvements, estimated at $7 million. The amendment before you tonight, just a summary of that, it adds $3.9 million to the bond issue, $3,980,000 to the bond issue, changes the route of which we'll issue the bonds to a TERS revenue bond, and that close to $4 million addition is made up of adding $2.7 million to the bond issue for the purchase of 355 acres of land west of Windland Road, add $710,000 for rail construction. We needed an additional $1.4 million. Since February, the price of steel has increased significantly, and based on our updated estimates, we needed to add those amounts to the project cost. And we also added $800,000 for a contingency in order to compensate for any increases in steel prices in the next 2 months. This amendment also reduces issuance cost by $230,000. The next slide just shows a picture of where all the rail will be put in. One's to serve our rail park, and also its relocation of rail with improvements to Northwest Loop 363, and then west of the yellow line, or the Gulf States Toyota site, is the 355 acres that's mentioned. Also included in the amendment is some cleanup. We're reallocating $14,000 from one project to cover cost for a change order and testing fees. We adjusted the financing plan through year 2022 to include debt service adjustments to the bonds. And then we also took $202,000 out of the fund balance in the plan, and that's for increased debt service of $2,300, and we decreased our future income projections. Within your council packet was included a financing plan and a detailed project plan. I'd be happy to take any questions or comments related to those.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Council questions? Staff? Mr. Grand, Mr. Blackburn, anything to add?
Mayor, just briefly, I didn't mention on the consent agenda, but item N is in Nancy on your consent agenda is related to this in some degree in the sense that there were 3 documents there that you have authorized now that formally allow us to really begin a process that we've been working, as the item mentioned, months of negotiations with BN to allow us to formally begin advertising, which I think we began today. No, soon. Next Sunday, I'm sorry. A week from Sunday, we'll begin advertising and moving forward with that process to actually lay steel in the park. The items are all tied together, but it is a fairly significant evening in that sense for both that item and these items to allow that project to continue to move forward and again actually see work progress on the commitments and the effort that was done to bring Gulf States Toyota.
Thank you, sir. Comments or action on item 7?
Mayor, we need a public hearing.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Excuse me. This item does require a public hearing, so I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council?
I move that we approve as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second for approval of the amendment to the Tax Increment Financing Reinvestment Zone Number 1 financing plan. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 8A and B, first readings, public hearings. Consider adopting an ordinance designating the South First Street corridor from Adams Avenue to Loop 363 as a tax abatement reinvestment zone number 13 for commercial, industrial, residential tax abatement, and authorizing a number of other economic development incentives for property redevelopment. Item 8B, consider adopting an ordinance establishing the city's economic development policy, setting out a program for promoting economic development within the city by reestablishing criteria and guidelines for tax abatement, authorizing loans and grants of public money, and providing personnel and services of the municipality to promote local economic development and to stimulate business and commercial activity. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. These two ordinances do go together. Last year, you adopted the city's strategic investment zone report and project, which seeks to identify 10 very important corridors or areas within the city. And through this program, we have sought for the last year to begin to implement that. The approach is really twofold. It's a kind of a carrot and stick approach with everything from adopting new regulations to code enforcement in those areas. The part that we're bringing forward to you today really is more the carrot side of that, and it is our first effort to establish some specific incentives for one of these areas. And I hope it's the first of several, but initially, in part, I think because of the work that Kim and David and others are working with the TMED program, we thought South First Street was a good location to start that. So this begins that. It really has two elements. It has a tax abatement program and another group of packages that really relate to incentives in those areas. Alan? Sorry. As I said, South First Street was one of those 10 incentive zones. We've been working on that in that area, already doing some code enforcement, and we see a huge need or upside, if you will, for redevelopment in that area. There's a lot of vacant property, certainly a number of buildings that just could use some renovation. The first part of the ordinance does designate that area as a tax abatement reinvestment zone, and I had some questions about that today. So that term reinvestment zone is used in the city in two different ways. We have a tax increment financing reinvestment zone, which doesn't abate taxes. It just sets aside a part of the taxes that are paid for improvements in those areas. This isn't that kind of reinvestment zone. It's a tax abatement reinvestment zone, which allows people to invest on their property and if they enter into an agreement with us, we can abate a portion of the increase in value of taxes for that area. And so the property owner continues to pay the baseline value of taxes or taxes on that existing property value, but any increase, if you enter into this agreement, would be abated. And you designate that area, that abatement, or the designation lasts for 5 years and makes those properties eligible for tax abatement. We're proposing in the second part of the second ordinance that's in this package that we establish criteria for that area of 5 years, 100% tax abatement on eligible real and personal property for that area. And then the second part of the ordinance offers a package of incentives. The application for tax abatements would be through the city attorney's office. You establish criteria about what is eligible, what kinds of improvements, what minimal level of value or increase in property values. We're really targeting this kind of like the downtown area, which we think has been real successful. Eligible property improvements could be commercial, office, retail, and residential. We're looking for a minimum investment of $50,000 in real property or $100,000 in personal property with a useful life of 10 years or more. And again, 5 years, 100% tax abatement of the increased value. And it is very similar, the criteria for what we have downtown. This is a map showing the area. We're calling it the South First Street corridor, but it's a little broader than that. It's essentially, and I've sort of divided that into two parts. You have a larger map in front of you. It's the South First Street corridor from Adams all the way down to South Loop, but it broadens out to include portions of 3rd and 5th Street and as far west near the loop as 7th Street on the east. It goes over to the Temple College property and goes up, follows 3rd Street, then goes over to Main and 2nd Street and comes back up to Adams. So that's the target area. Some of the additional facade or additional incentives are everything from facade improvement grants, sign improvement grants, landscaping, asbestos survey abatement grants, demolition grants, sidewalk improvement grants. Quickly, just kind of describe those facade grants. We propose a matching grant up to $10,000 for the replacement or a new facade that meets approved masonry standards in those areas. It doesn't require that for everybody, but if you want a grant, you have to meet those standards. Sign improvement grants are up to $1,500, again a one-to-one matching grant for replacement of existing signs or installation of a new sign. Applies only to ground-mounted monument-type signs, and again with some standards related to the construction of those signs. Landscaping, 2 levels of grants, $2,500 for just landscaping that meets or exceeds our standard on a one-to-one basis, or up to $3,500 matching grant if it includes an irrigation system. And those improvements could be landscaping, plants and trees, that kind of thing, but also hardscape like retaining walls, art, trellises, arbors, that kind of thing. And we also have the potential, the city now operates a tree farm, we grow trees, and we could make those available kind of in-kind to landscaping projects in this area. Asbestos survey and abatement grants, we see a need for that in this community. We've got a large number of older buildings that part of the reason that someone doesn't want to come in and rehab that building or use it is because there may be asbestos in the building or is. There's a need to do a survey and possibly abatement. So we would offer a matching grant for that. Demolition grants up to $1,000 or $1,500. I think that slide is wrong, but the demolition grant would be, I think the amount is $1,000, and it could involve either a matching grant if they're doing the work or city equipment if we're doing it. Go ahead. Yeah. And finally, sidewalk grants up to $2,500 for the construction of new or replacement sidewalks on a one-to-one basis, and that could cover the costs of taking out old, we've got some rundown sidewalks in that area, or landfilling those parts, or the materials and labor to put that in. And again, eligible properties would be all of those properties within that area, which is includes more than First Street. not a vested right to receive those. It's subject to the available funds, and again, the minimum investment is $50,000 for commercial, and it's subject to the available funds. This year, we have about $85,000 appropriated for CIS projects. Next year, we would be looking for some kind of a additional funding or carry forward funding from the City Council. We have to set up an application process both for the tax abatement and for the other incentives through the city offices, and that designation of the tax abatement area would last for 5 years. And as I said, if this is successful, if we use those allocated funds, and we have some success down there, we could certainly come back to you if we need additional funds. And if we have that kind of success, hopefully you would favorably consider those. And again, we hope that this is the first of several of these ordinances that we'll see in other corridors. For example, MLK, North 3rd Street, downtown area, Avenue G and H. Thank you. I'll take any questions right now.
The information in our package was correct on the amounts?
Yes.
Okay, all right. There's a couple of them that differ from the slide.
I may have missed this while I was out, if so, I apologize, but the boundaries of the zone look to be drawn exactly like when you on 3rd Street. Like if you look at the first street it goes over, it bisects the block, so the property fronting 5th Street is included. But if you look at where 3rd Street starts, the property fronting the street does not look to be included. It looks to be the curb. Is that?
I think it's a property on one side, on 3rd, but we could certainly alter that.
It seems like it would make sense to include both sides of the street if you're trying to get redevelopment on that area of 3rd Street. The same thing would be for Main Street as well. I mean, you would include both sides of the street. So
we could easily do that. This is the first reading and does require a public hearing.
Other questions, council, before we go into the public hearing? This item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open on both item A and B. Item A being the ordinance designating the area, and then B, the item establishing the city's economic development policy that Mr. Graham outlined. Now declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to making your comments. Yes, ma'am, Nancy.
My name is Nancy Kessel. I'm based in Rye.
It's this for you, so. That's
I
weird.
used to be a teacher. I can.
Well, but we're televised, and so this will help pick the sound up.
Nancy Etzel, 329 Big Timber Drive. I had a question in regards to the sidewalk improvement grant. As I have gone around downtown Temple, I've noticed a lack of curb ramps. With the sidewalk improvement grant, is there some note of making sure that the sidewalks are either ADA compliant or include that?
If it's replacement of an existing one or new construction of sidewalks, it will meet ADA requirements.
Okay. Just want to make sure that that's noted.
Absolutely.
Here, Mr. Delar will take that from you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone else wish to comment or ask a question regarding either of these items, A or B? Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearings closed on both item A and B. Any further comments, or Mr. Blackman?
Mayor and Council, I just wanted to offer a couple of comments. One is I want to thank Mr. Graham and Ms. Fouts, Kim Fouts, Assistant City Manager, for their, in particular, for their work on this in this area. I'm very appreciative of that from my chair, and I do think it's an important and significant piece of work to get us to this point. I'm very excited about what the potential is for that area and the TMED and many things that we're working on to try and encourage reinvestment, redevelopment in a manner that is consistent with some of the strategic vision and goals and purposes that we've been talking about. One of the things I wanted to highlight from Mr. Graham's comments were in regard to the program or the incentives that are proposed, and again, we very much encourage them to think about multiple incentives and really a buffet of options and opportunities that might exist for redevelopment in that area. But I did want to make sure, and he mentioned in his comments, but underscore that the item in and of itself, or the ordinances in and of themselves, and the package that we're proposing, doesn't necessarily obligate or commit the city to X amount of dollars. As was mentioned, it's subject to funds being available and appropriated for any match or participation that might be available. And it's also set up on sort of a first-come, first-served basis to some degree, in the sense of whatever amount is appropriated in the budget under this program, that amount is available for those who get there early, so to speak, and move through that process. So it's not an open-ended, my point on that is it's not an open-ended commitment on our part if the council does choose to move forward with it. And again, I would also recommend favorable consideration for you. Thank you, Mayor.
I'm particularly pleased that after probably close to 3 years since we initiated any type of discussion related to this with the purchase of, or with a building being purchased on North 3rd Street, in which Temple Economic Development Corporation participated in that, and we made a commitment to get involved in rehabilitation of some corridors downtown, and then Mr. Graham's work and the committee's work for probably in excess of 2 years on the CIS program. I'm particularly pleased to see this come forward and this finally come to fruition for our community. Certainly it uses tax dollars and for the improvement of private facilities, private properties, but it is certainly within the keeping of the strategic objective of the city, which is to expand the tax base, and that as we beautify and help to improve the appearance of our community, I think it will improve the values and enhance the values of properties along those corridors, thus helping to achieve that objective. So I think this is a very good thing for our community. I'm glad to see that we're moving forward on this, and I appreciate staff's work and the diligence of those citizens who worked on the committees to bring this forward. And I know this is an experiment, but an experiment that I think will go well, and I look forward to the expansion of this as it proves itself out in the time to come. So, that being said, any other comments, or we'll entertain a motion on this item?
Mayor, I agree with Tony as far as both sides of the street. I think we need to push 3rd Street to the west a half a block, and Main Street to the east a half a block, which would encompass both sides of the street, and I'd like to make that motion to approve with that amendment.
I think what we can do, since this is first reading, is maybe just approve this, and then in the interim, can we come back and
you could do it either way.
that?
Certainly, if you want to make it that change of first reading, we'll bring it back and second reading that way.
And just to make sure if there's others that need to be incorporated into that for the same reason. So, your call, and is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve as presented, with the exception of expansion to include both sides of the street that's in that area, specifically 3rd and Main. Okay. All right.
So it would go down the alley.
Yes.
So, okay. Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval of both items A and B, I presume?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
A and B, okay. I have a motion for approval of item 8A and 8B and a second. Is there further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Junior?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansen?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 9A and 9B, first reading, public hearings. Consider adopting an ordinance amending the West Temple Comprehensive Plan to reflect commercial uses on 6.1 acres out of land commonly known as Outblock 1104C, located on the south side of West Adams Avenue, east of the residential subdivision of Crescent View Phase 1. And item 9B is to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from single-family 2 district and planned development general retail district to planned development general retail district on approximately 6.1 acres out of land commonly known as Outblock 1104C, located on the south side of West Adams Avenue, east of the residential subdivision of Crescent View, Phase 1. Mr. Mabry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a view of the future land use map for the area. The subject property is crosshatched on the screen. The West Temple Plan, which was adopted in 1999, shows moderate and medium density residential in the rear half of the rear two-thirds of the property, along with the property to the east of the subject parcel, and retail future land use for the front third or so of the subject property. The request would designate the entire property retail with purple on the map. At its April 21st meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted in alignment with the staff recommendation to 8-0 to approve the future land use map amendment from residential to retail because the request complies with the future land use plan, the thoroughfare plan, and adequate public facilities will serve the site at the time that it is platted. And the plat is currently being administratively reviewed, and they will bore under 2305 to tap onto water on the other side. Now for the background of the zoning portion of the case. The property is currently zoned as Planned Development GR. In 2005, that designation was granted to the property to allow mini storage on the property. However, it was approved so that at a later date a development plan could be presented to the council for approval. Instead, the staff recommends replacing that PD with this plan development designation, allowing mini storage, and presenting the development plan simultaneously, since that is usually the norm on how plan developments are reviewed. The desire to mitigate any negative impacts of the mini storage facility are one of the driving forces behind the staff and Planning and Zoning Commission recommendations that I will be presenting to you in a moment. This is a view of the surroundings of the property. I've kind of taken the development plan that you have as an exhibit in your packet and superimposed it a little bit onto this map. So you can see that there is a 60-foot wide drainage channel that separates the property from the Crescent View subdivision to the east. And there also is going to be, in accordance with the plat that's being reviewed, a 2.05 stormwater basin at the rear of the property that will handle stormwater drainage from the property. That's to show you that the entire subject property won't consist completely of storage units, but mainly the front two-thirds of the property, which amounts to about 4 acres. Here's the zoning for the property. The light yellow is single-family 2, the pink is general retail, and the green is agricultural. The property is sort of split, again with the two-thirds, but this time the front third or so being zoned the GR, planned development, and then the back two-thirds, about 5 acres, is zoned SF2. Again, this proposal would create a new PD with the underlying general retail zoning district, and it would be accompanied by the development plan that I'll present in a second. Here's an aerial of the area. It's not 100% accurate in that the piece here where it's labeled fully developed is now fully developed with single-family houses. At the time of the aerial was taken, this piece had not fully developed yet. This is just a view of across the street from the property. It's mostly vacant, and then there's a few larger lot single-family units a little over to the east across the street, across Adams. And then this is a view of the subject property from the ground, looking toward the houses that currently sit in the Crescent View subdivision. This is a ground level view of the drainage channel, 60 feet wide, and then the property line is shown in black dash, just to give you an idea that the drainage channel is on the property of the subdivision, and then this private or this piece of property that we're talking about for the zone change is on the other side of the drainage channel. One of the biggest concerns going into reviewing this proposal was the buffering along the residential subdivision. The zoning ordinance requires a 6-foot fence or wall or landscaping at the property line when a non-residential use abuts a residential use, but it doesn't get specific as to what kinds of landscaping would be required to serve as that buffer. And so we are suggesting landscaping to you. And also, normally a 10-foot setback would be required on this property since it abuts a residential use. But being a PD, a plan development, the flexibility comes into play, and we can recommend and support a 5-foot setback instead of the normally required 10-foot if landscaping is provided. The original application volunteered several amenities, one being 100% limestone facades facing 2305, another one being no bay doors facing 2305, and another being irrigated, fully irrigated landscaping, automatically irrigated landscaping. The development plan, which is the staff and planning and zoning commission recommendation that you have with you, also has some of the other following amenities added to it. One canopy tree per 40 linear feet along this lot line abutting the single-family subdivision. One canopy tree per 40 linear feet along the front of 2305, and a continuous hedgerow or berm in addition to that. A maximum 8-foot tall and 80 square foot monument sign along normally the front of the property. Pitched roofs for the units that are along the east property line in order to, again, try to mitigate the impact that could potentially face the residential subdivision to the east. And I'd just like to expand that I say canopy trees, what we mean by that are something along the lines of ash, cypress, elm, holly, maple, oak, anything that is beyond the crepe myrtle or something of that nature that tends to get larger. One piece of the property that wasn't addressed by at the time of the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing is this west property line. It abuts partially retail future land uses and partially residential future land uses. Right now, there is no formal recommendation to have any landscaping along this property line, but I would also recommend that the council, when making a motion, consider a 5-foot strip along that side as well. And one more thing I wanted to add. The yellow on the screen shows the units that would be affected by the limestone requirement, and then the kind of salmon color shows the units that would be affected by the recommendation, which I didn't mention earlier, to have a material known as stucco tech to cover the exposed sides of the units that would help to guarantee that there's not a harsh material on the outside of those units as well. The elements of this plan development comply with our thoroughfare plan and future land use plan, and again, the public facilities will be in place after the plat is approved. The general retail district is the underlying district for the property, and so if for some reason the mini warehouse didn't take off and couldn't be built, The general retail would still be the underlying district, and the uses allowed there, such as restaurants, grocery stores, department stores, offices, would be in place. Things like pawn shops and kennels and more intense vehicle repair would not be permitted. And many warehouses, normally, again, a prohibited use, but in this plan development, it is a permitted use. 18 notices were mailed to surrounding property owners, notifying them of the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. And 2 of them responded negatively to the proposal. And those are shown in Ds on the map. The newspaper printed notice of the public hearing for the P&Z hearing on April 12th in accordance with state law and local requirements. At its April 21st meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 8-0 along with the staff recommendation to approve the zoning change from SF2 and PDGR to the new PDGR, and to also vote for approval of the development plan, which has the following features, which I will recap that I went over. Exterior walls facing 2305 to be 100% limestone. Exterior walls facing neighboring properties to the east and west to be the stucco tech and they went specific enough to request the camel and cream color. No bay doors facing 2305. Automatic irrigation installed with the landscaping. A canopy tree per 40 linear feet along the east property line. A canopy tree along with a continuous hedgerow per 40 linear feet along the street property line. Monument sign 8 feet in height and 80 square feet in area, and pitched roofs along the units that are adjacent to the residential subdivision. At this point, I can answer any questions that the council may have on this case.
Brian, on that drainage channel on the east side, is that maintained by the city or the owner? And how's that accessed?
It is a publicly maintained channel. It goes right up to 2305.
You'll be able to drive right off of 2305 and shred it?
There might be it might be a little too deep to do that. Part of the plat that's being administratively reviewed is to allow is to have easements on this property to allow for maintenance and getting into the back of the channel, which could then allow maintenance to go up toward 2305 with that.
Is there? I mean, what they're recommending sounds good. Was there a reason they didn't go on the back or on that other side with the screening, with the trees?
I guess it wasn't quite as pressing as making sure we got the screening along the residential and along the front. But I think that it's definitely an idea worth having to have that screening on that side. It could cut down on some of the aisle width for this westernmost set of units, so that was probably one consideration as well.
But the reason I don't know a whole lot about landscaping, but aren't the trees that were chosen? Those grow up and out. They don't provide any screening low. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The low screening would be mitigated by the stucco materials that the actual backs of the
on that side. But there won't be a fence there. The back of the units will be the fence. Is that correct?
Right. The way that this is set up right now, that's correct.
Okay. So if you did it on the other side, there will be a fence. Well, whatever, there's going to be a fence on the other side, and then there's going to be smaller units on the back. That's correct?
On the back here?
Those are smaller units, correct?
Yes, sir, they're smaller units. Depending on the zoning on the west side, which I'll go back and check, a fence or screening may not be required. If it's non-residential zoning to the west, then it wouldn't be required. So,
but the back part is resident. I mean, it's
yes, sir.
SF2.
Yes. So when the building permit comes in, eventually we would need to check check that something is provided along here, whether the council ends up recommending a specific kind of screening on that side or not. At least this portion will need to have something required by our zoning ordinance in terms of screening.
And is the person looking at doing this project, are they amenable to the recommended changes so far?
Yes, sir. So far, my understanding is they're amenable to everything.
And so the concern on the other side might be if there was some additional landscaping required for screening, it could actually cut down their yield of units.
It appears that way from the plan that we have right now.
But would they have to be trees, or could they be those hedges that grow, those hedges that grow really thick and
It could be, I guess, it's all up for grabs with the plan development. You can recommend and pass what you think would be effective. The trees would generally, or maybe a lower, a higher growing hedge might be a little better than trees for doing some screening along that side.
well,
There's probably a fence there too, isn't it?
well, yeah, there'll have to be a fence, but then everything they did on this other side looks, I mean, it sounds great for the homeowners. I mean, you've got the stucco, you've got the trees, it's gonna look nice, but where that backside, where it's SF2, where you're gonna have more houses, there's gonna be the bay doors facing, it will have to be a security fence with all that. It would make it just something to afford that same level of protection. Would be not that to that expense of stucco, but maybe some type of hedge or something that would provide a screen from that. But I mean, I don't know, say yes to
Brian, didn't you say that to the rear will be a detention pond?
Yes. And of course, it doesn't show, this is the development plan for the mini storage units. The detention pond, the property continues to the south here, and the detention pond would cover past the screen for an extent.
What's the rear of the building made out of? Stucco as well?
The rear of back here?
The south side.
No, it would just be, as it stands now, metal or whatever the kind of default material is.
So
for the.
is there I guess the masonry ordinance is an exception to the masonry ordinance since it's in effect?
No, I meant to cover that. I'm sorry. The masonry ordinance, having been passed in 2 weeks ago, I guess, this was submitted in March, so they're vested under previous standards.
If it would not have been, would that side have required masonry? Because it's not.
If they had submitted it after the approval of the masonry standards, since 2305 is a strategic investment zone, I believe that it would. I'm hearing it would not apply. I guess because of the use and the way that works out.
I've interpreted it that way.
It would not. It would not apply.
It does not.
Mini storage don't count.
But it's not a matter of mini storage. It's a matter of it's facing. It's not facing the arterial or that, and it's so many feet away from it. I think was the requirement. Mr. Dolan, or is
why doesn't it apply?
I'm getting feedback that the rear is exempt, but I'm not.
The front's not. I'm just curious because I know this doesn't apply, but I'd like to know why. If they submitted it yesterday, let's say
the rear is exempt.
Unless there were houses. If there were houses on the rear, it would not be.
Correct.
So there are no houses.
They own the land.
Right.
So one building, if it lies outside that line or whatever, the remainder of that building doesn't apply. Is that how that works?
From what I understand, the rear buildings on the way they're laid out, Now, if they aren't abutting a residentially zoned district, then they are not subject to the masonry standards. What's here is the proposed drainage area, and so that's still part of the property, even though it's not shown on the plan.
So what's behind that drainage channel further to the south? I know it's a cornfield now, but it could potentially be residential, so it doesn't matter?
It's currently agriculturally zoned, and so if a property owner later decides to rezone that, then, but if it's zoned agricultural, that would exempt out the rear buildings from being masonry.
Other questions?
That's pretty straightforward. You're smarter than I am.
If there are no other questions or comments from council or staff, these items 9A and 9B require public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on these items, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. How do you do?
Colette Marshall with Barnes Independent Developers. I am currently under contract to purchase this land contingent upon, of course, the rezoning. And I think I can clear up quite a few of y'all's questions. That layout has changed quite a bit since it was previously brought. I'd like to hand y'all this information about Stucco Tech. This is the product we're recommending to use. And I also have a sample you can actually touch it. Can you put the layout, the plat back up? On the south side, against that retention pond, those buildings aren't going to be there at all anymore. That will be a privacy fence all along the south side. The red area that's circled, those units have been pushed back with no doors facing that residential side. So it will be solid wall with a privacy fence. What P&Z had asked me to do was to do the Stucco Tech on that side where you see the trees against the drainage channel, but we have come back and decided that we will do the whole project in the Stucco Tech.
Wow.
So it will be 100% Stucco Tech. I would ask, though, that the ones in yellow that back up to the other commercial, that be allowed to be the Stucco Tech too, and just have the limestone on the facade. And if y'all want to touch this. It is a metal 20-gauge steel product that has been baked epoxy on top. It's done at the factory this way. This is the way it comes. And it's a 20-gauge material with stone topping on it. Another item where they showed the two people who had wrote in letters, the ones that I want to point out that those two residents are, that area is already zoned general retail. That was already going to be, their backyard. So we just want to come to Temple and provide a clean, safe, attractive self-storage for the area, and anything we can do to be good neighbors, landscaping, this Stucco Tech product. I'm here to answer any questions about any of those items.
Out of curiosity, is this material a whole lot more expensive than a regular?
It doesn't cost any more. That's why we decided to do the whole
Yeah.
thing. Yes,
So it doesn't
sir.
cost any more.
No, that's what, first when we had proposed that, we thought it was going to be quite a bit, and when we went to our supplier, he let us know that he could do it for the same cost. So we're like, hey, let's do the whole project in that.
Wow, we didn't hear much about that.
Love it when a plan comes together.
Sir?
Love it when a plan comes together.
It does. And we originally we are the Big Red Barn. That is the name. That is we have two other self-storage facilities in Bell County. But because of P&Z, they didn't like red, so I guess we're going to be the Big Camel Barn now, or Tan Barn or something. But we'll do with the neutral colors and probably have just like a red soffit trim, something very just accent color on the soffit.
Did you ask for Stucco Tech on the front as well instead of the stone? Is that what you asked
No,
for?
sir, I'm fine with doing it on the facade of 2305. I'm talking about that second little row, right there. That's already retail. That's not ever going to be residential. It's general retail already. And so I'd like to have that stucco check on that.
Is stone, is what you're saying?
Yes, sir. Just on the front facades, but that row right there. And there will be a black wrought iron fence all along the fronts, and then the privacy fence along where the red circle is, and privacy fence along the back where the row of buildings I told you we're eliminating are. The reason we're eliminating those buildings, it really reduces our yield quite a bit, but for drainage, because we're getting all the water going to the back so it doesn't go in the channel, yeah, we can't have the water running into those buildings, so we've eliminated those. And the layout the aisles have actually got wider to accommodate for the fire trucks. So we've made the rows larger. Our yield has reduced quite a bit, but we really think the area would benefit from the self-storage there.
Still works for you.
Yes, sir. Not as good, but we want to be in Temple.
Okay.
I was raised here, and I've been trying to get back to this side of the county for a long time.
Oh, you got one by the airport, don't you, in Killeen? Is that what?
Yes, sir. I have one on Stan Schluter.
I know where that one is.
And then in Winfield, yes, sir. And that you see that big red barn.
Big red barn.
You can't have that here, unfortunately. So.
Well, I appreciate your accommodation and your willingness to work with us to do something that's good for the neighbors and the potential neighbors and everything. So I think this looks like a good project.
Yes, sir. On the side with the trees, they're just going to have it'll be a nice, this smooth stucco wall and then landscaping. So it'll be very attractive, I believe, facade for the neighborhood.
No fence on that side?
No, sir, we weren't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
This was going to be the solid.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Make sure that I understood that.
And there won't be any lighting on that side unless y'all recommend it, because I didn't want to be shining in. We use all low down lights, so it's not like it's going to be lit up from a mile away. It'll just shine on the aisles because there will be security cameras that'll be monitored, secured gates are on a keypad, so it's a secure facility.
Other questions, council?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I have one question for Brian. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mayor, Council, I'm Bob Mitchell, Mitchell & Associates, 102 North College, Killeen, Texas. I believe I can give a little bit more background on the history of the area. Y'all may have recalled there was actually a residential subdivision plat that was platted and approved where this particular area is. In the meantime, the owner has decided that the highest and best use for this area is probably going to be more retail and general retail type establishments, and so that plat has been abandoned. And he's coming back forward, and as the tracts develop, then coming through and applying plats and zoning at that time. So I think you'll see additional zoning cases, especially what's currently there as SF2, I believe. That's probably going to go more in the rounds of general retail. I know even recently there have been some other people looking at it for residential purposes, and those offers have been denied and thinking more along the terms of general retail and those type of uses. Also, a good portion of the area, as you can see, about a third of the 6 acres that's in the zoning request will be used for stormwater detention facility, and it may well be expanded as different uses come in, and that area will grow to the west and then access through the existing drainage channel there. So if I can answer any other questions you may have.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Ma'am? Certainly. There you go. Thank you very much.
I'm Sylvia Odenwall, and my address is 6609 Brooks Drive. My backyard faces that facility, and I've been talking to my neighbors. I'm one of the ones that sent in a letter, but I believe they said that my house did not go into the area there, but it faces directly onto what they're planning there. I understand that we're a small number in our neighborhood, but I bought this retirement home because it was a quiet, safe neighborhood and a small one, And I appreciate the things that they're saying. I know they're trying to do it, but I have had some of my furniture in a storage facility before, and I know the lights and the noise and the traffic, and I would be sitting on my back porch looking at what you're seeing there. And I understand it's very difficult when there are few of us and a big company, and I understand for the owner that he wants the most money possible, and someone who tried to buy the subdivision for more houses could not meet the price. But I hope that you will consider those of us who bought houses there with it zoned mainly as single family, thinking we would be up against the houses there, and we'll be looking at this with valued property instead.
Thank you, ma'am. I think what was said is where the houses were that had sent in the denial was actually up against property that had already been zoned the general retail. And so your house was already there. So
if I'm not misunderstanding, the part that's general retail is the northwest corner? Is that correct?
It's that whole section to the north of that line right there.
All the yellow is not single-family?
Correct. Only the portion down below that's SF2, which is to the south of where your home is, if your home is one of the ones with the Ds there. So you would have always had a
Well, I understood when I bought it that all of that in the yellow was single-family. So I may be wrong, but that's what I understood.
Mr. Mabry,
Yes, sir, Mayor.
Is that correct?
What you said is a correct interpretation of the map.
Okay.
So you're saying we would have retail no matter what?
It is zoned retail already. It was not zoned SF2. So.
Well, let me say this. I'm not necessarily just against the storage facility. I would much prefer having that to some noisy other retail establishments. But I just hope they will take into fact that we'll be sitting on our backyards and our back patios looking at that. And if they can fix it, it won't help the value of the home, but they could fix it so I can look out off of my porch and be happy. I'd really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
I have a question on the lighting. Is there, that'll be dealt with. It won't be shining directly into those homes.
Correct. It will be low, I think it's called low-density indirect, and there will be nothing facing her. The salmon color, I guess that is, there will be the first row of lights facing on to the actual drive. And one of the things, too, is we do have set hours. Nobody will be in the facility past 10 o'clock, so it's not like there's like a Jack-in-the-Box. It's open 24 hours. No, ma'am. There won't be any lights facing your backyard at all.
Okay.
There's none on where the trees are. There'll be no lights.
We talked to a guy in our neighborhood that his father's a city planner, and he talked about the noise, and he talked about that they needed to have lights so they wouldn't be shining in your backyard. And
yeah, there won't be any lights.
My other question is,
Could you just state your name and address for the record?
I'm her daughter.
Well, I understand that, but for our record.
Well, I didn't know if to say 66.
It's still on.
6609 Brooks Drive.
And your name?
Edie Donovan.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
And then what I have a question about is, are those units going to be? It's going to be the back wall facing us, right? The units are not going to be where they go in.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. No, you'll just have the stucco wall with trees, with no lights.
Will it be?
Excuse me?
How high?
9 feet, because we'll pitch down, so there won't be any water going into that drainage ditch. It'll be going directly into our drive. So it'll be 9 foot tall.
I'm not sure that will cover the units.
Those trees will look great.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the building. I didn't know you meant the trees.
How big is the building?
9 feet tall.
And then it pitches downward from 9 feet, so on her side, it'll be 9 feet.
Yes, sir.
And we'll pitch downward towards.
There's no fence. It's the building. It's the wall.
Oh, so that orange unit there is not a wall?
Yes, ma'am, it is. The back of it is a wall, and on the front side and the drive side will be the actual doors. And we've done a lot of studies on traffic flow. This is one of the lowest traffic retail uses. People come in, bring their stuff. They usually don't come back and visit it unless they're removing it. So it actually has less traffic than, say, a service station or a, Jack-in-the-Box, I throw that, or any kind of convenience store. It has much less traffic.
I have had storage units before, and I understand they're not as busy as some other things, but I also know in others, they have gone in at any time during the night they wanted to.
Yes, ma'am, we're limited access. The gates will be, they automatically shut down at 10.
Okay, they don't have codes to get in the gate?
We have them from 6 to 10 is what our hours of operation are for the,
I think when those trees grow up in that stucco wall, you're going to be much more satisfied than having a restaurant or something else in that retail area that you would be dealing with.
I want to ask how tall the wall is in between that we're talking about, the stucco wall that you went around and showed.
it's 9 feet tall, and that is the building itself. The back of the wall is the building.
So there's not, we were told there'd at least be another wall there.
The wall is the back.
So there's a space in between the buildings, there'll be a space that will not have the stucco wall, right? So the building doesn't
I don't know if I'm
have-
explaining it correctly, I'm sorry. The back of the building is the wall.
Yeah, the back of the building is the fence, basically.
Yeah, but it's a big unit.
No.
No, it is not a
It's
fence.
a wall, it's a building, yes, it's a, like this right here. Like this is the back of the building, that's the stucco. And that's where the tree's gonna
I just was
be.
seeing the space in between the buildings up there.
Oh, right there,
Oh, you had a
that,
little piece of fence.
that little thing, there will be a wrought iron.
Between the two, are those purple things buildings?
I don't, I'm sorry, what?
What are those squares above?
Here?
Are those not
Those are the
separate
units.
buildings?
Those are buildings that you won't see.
But I mean, they are, there's a space in them. in between the-
There's a drive.
Here? And, ma'am, Ms. Odenwald, are you speaking about right here?
Yes, right there.
Right there. Yes, ma'am. And there will be a wrought iron or privacy, whatever they see fit, fence right there. So people will not be able to drive through there. That is for the fire department, because for their hose length, they have to be able to get around.
This is a drainage ditch right here,
Yes.
all along, right there in between your house and this building, and
Right,
these
but we
buildings
don't-
right here.
Right, we don't see
So-
the ditches down here. What I'm
Yeah,
talking
I
about is
understand.
what we look out the
I
back.
understand it, but so nobody's driving in there.
Yeah.
So
No, I know they're not driving.
it's just like the wall to your left, ma'am. It's going to be 9 foot. It's going to be just as plain as that wall, except there's going to be trees there. That's what you're going to look at out of your backyard. Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. Other comments or questions? We still have the public hearing open. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearings on item 9A and 9B closed. Council, your pleasure on first reading for 9A and B.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item 9A and 9B
Can I
on
ask
first reading.
One
Mr.
question.
Jeter? Of
The
course.
changes that she made, that she said that they're making, those are not a part of this. We are approving that or her changes? Put it in the motion, the changes that she has been saying.
Yes,
Okay. So,
yes.
And she's in the record.
Yeah, if you want to amend it to that, that'd be fine. Make it to the motion. The motion, as she reflected the change in metal from the back to all stucco and stone where she wants to put stone and walls where need walls.
Okay. All right. So you second that amended motion? Okay. Other comments or questions? Being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 10, consider adopting a resolution confirming the appointment of the Assistant City Attorney. Mr. Grant.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for this opportunity. As you know, we have a vacancy in our office. It's a position that you created in our department after a few years of having gone from 4 attorneys to 3. You gave us that 4th attorney back. I appreciate that. We had a number of qualified applicants for that job. We interviewed about 6 people, very qualified. From that group, I am very pleased to recommend to you Robin Houston, who is an attorney with about a decade of experience in government right now. She is currently working for the state comptroller's office and has been there for, I think, about 4 years, 7. And before that, she worked for what is now TSEC, but was the Texas Natural Resource Conservation, TNRCC, and has done a lot of litigation for those agencies. Tracy was very pleased that she now works with sales tax, and she is a graduate of Baylor, undergraduate in political science. And Russell, you'd be very pleased that she is a UT graduate of law school. And she just comes to us very qualified, and we couldn't be more pleased. And under our charter, I can hire an assistant, but I need your confirmation of that appointment. So I would like to present Ms. Houston to you for your confirmation, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Council, questions or comments? Otherwise, a motion of ratification.
Mr. Mayor, I move we ratify the resolution and authorize Jonathan Graham to hire Ms. Houston to be an attorney for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Janset. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for adopting the resolution confirming the appointment of Robin Houston as the new Assistant City Attorney. Is there further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Janzak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Lennon.
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Ms. Houston, you come forward, please. Welcome to City Council. Very glad to have you, if you don't mind. And you will sit with Temple Tim. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
Very excited. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Item number 11 is a board appointment. Consider adopting a resolution appointing 4 at-large members to the Temple Medical Education District Coordinating Group. It's a recommendation from staff at this point that we table this item. We're not ready to bring any names forward for recommendation at this point. So I'll entertain a motion to table.
Motion to table on item 11.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Janzak. Mayor Pro Tem Lennon.
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Item number 12 is a discussion item. Discuss the city's policy regarding conflicts of interest. Mr. Green?
Thank you, Mayor.
This one up for us?
I'll be happy to. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. I've got a pretty short PowerPoint presentation. David, come on. Work with me here.
Sure.
We can take as much time or as little as you like, but I'll just give you a quick background. Go ahead, Alan. Conflict of interest, the term, what it literally means is a financial interest in a matter before a governmental body that a public official has on a matter before that board. Go ahead, Alan. The financial interest may be an interest in a business or real property, or may be held by the public official or someone related to him in a close degree by blood or marriage. The matter before the governmental body may be a purchase of some property, a rezoning of property, and procurement of services. The concept is broad enough to include both direct and indirect financial interests. For example, a direct example would be a contract between a public official and the government that on whose board he serves. And an indirect one is something where the business could receive a benefit that's greater than the benefit to the public, like a zoning case where a council member might have to abstain. In the term public official includes all of your appointed officials for all your boards. It includes elected officials like yourself and even city employees. I think it's real important. I know there was a letter to the editor a few weeks ago talking about what the common law had been, and I won't burden you with a lot of legal terms here, but common law is a body of law made by courts where they're interpreting basically public policy and public interest. And the common law in Texas had been for a number of years that it was that public officials for governmental bodies could not have a financial interest in a contract with that entity. And under common law, a contract that a city or a county or the state tried to enter into, in which one of their officials had a financial interest in, was just illegal and void. It wasn't voidable, it was void as a matter of public policy. And that common law is seeking to even avoid the appearance of an impropriety. It is possible, I mean, there's a whole, when we say the common law, there's all kinds of common law out there, there's a whole body of it, but common law is subject to change, both by state and federal legislation or even local legislation. And in 1987, the state of Texas, the legislature did change that common law doctrine of conflicts of interest. But they did it only really with respect to local governments. And they did it by adopting Chapter 171 of the Local Government Code, which is something we train our new public officials on. And I'll just highlight a couple of those provisions. Chapter 171, dealing with conflict of interest, 171.07 says, this chapter preempts the common law conflicts of interest. That law, that common law interpretation that said you cannot have a contract between a local official and the city. And another provision said that it is possible to have a local provision that is more stringent than the legislative provision. So Chapter 171 says you have to abstain, but it also says if you've got a local charter provision or a local ordinance provision that's more strong, that is cumulative of the state law and it would also control. Go ahead. Go ahead. So, in essence, you could have a local provision that could still prohibit a financial conflict of interest. Go ahead. And prior to 1990, in the city of Temple, that was the case, like most cities. This is just a few years, 1990, after the change in the state law that changed the common law. The city council at that time appointed a charter review committee. I think it was about 30 people from across the city. They studied the entire charter. One of those provisions that they looked at was Section 44, and it read that no member of the city council or an appointed official or employee of the city could have a contract with the city. And it went on to say couldn't be involved in any public works contract or any kind of contract. Go ahead, Alan. And that if you couldn't sell materials, goods, and services to the city. And if someone attempted to do that, they would actually forfeit their office, and that contract would be void. So that was our charter prior to 1990. With that charter review committee, they recommended a change to that. It was reviewed by the city council. That was presented as part of a package of charter changes to voters in January of 1990. They approved those charter amendments, so that went into effect. Created a new section of the charter, and section 4.9 now reads like this. It says that no council member can use his influence to unduly benefit by reason of his public office. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. And it defines that unduly benefited as basically following the provisions of state law, which means if you have a business or you own property or you are a relative, then you stand to unduly benefit. Go ahead. And so it says that if you do have that kind of relationship to a contract, to a business, to a piece of property, or you're proposing to sell to the city, that you shall not vote or render a decision or use your position, authority, or influence to get that contract, to gain that greater benefit. And that is essentially following state law. Chapter 171. And that section provides that a knowing violation, a willful violation of that constitutes malfeasance in office, and if it's elected official or appointed official or employee, they could forfeit their office. Go ahead. So just to kind of summarize that we went through very quickly, what I believe it means is that no council member may unduly benefit, and that unduly benefiting means that they have that in recognizing that they do have that kind of financial interest that's greater than the interest of the benefit to the general public, that they have to abstain from participating in the discussion or vote on that item, which is very much what Chapter 171 requires. That's real quick. So our charter and state law are now in sync, and they just require that abstention. We have covered those materials. I won't try to go through that all unless you would like to, but I think we do training both for new council members and new board members. We require all of our appointed and elected officials to go through that training, and you have been given copies of those materials. So that's the conflict of interest provisions kind of in a nutshell, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Council, questions or comments?
This discussion, I guess, is related to a lot of the things that with contracts and different things like that. My concerns, and I have tried to do a good job of explaining them, and maybe I have not been. It's not specifically with the charter in the fact of whether a council person or anybody, I guess, appointed or anybody does business with the city. There's two specific issues that give me concern. The first is specifically contracts that require a high level of engagement and accountability with city staff is one issue. Whether the construction contracts, engineering contracts, if that were a point, or what those types of things. And the second issue is it's not whether vendor or subcontractor contracts are with people doing business with the city. It is the discussion, the council discussions that go on before those projects ever come to fruition. And I mean, let me see if I can explain this. 2 weeks ago, we in our workshop, when we were talking about how we handle council expenditures, which I was glad we had that discussion. I think we came up with a proactive solution, but basically what we agreed to do was to remove staff from that role of policing council people. And we did that by requiring 2 council members to approve our individual expenses. In fact, I know the mayor, I was one of 2 that approved the mayor's expense for the mayor last week. And so that was to remove the staff. When contracts are awarded to if we removed them and we saw what can happen when that, I mean, we all know what can happen when staff are put in the position of not necessarily an optimal position to police a council person. Well, when you're doing contracts that require supervision by staff, we in effect have the same thing. We have, whether if it's an engineering deal, if it's a construction deal, if it's now and in the future, they are having to be accountable to staff, engineers, inspectors, and those things, which gives me pause. The other thing is discussions that relate to development, and this is one of my concerns with the supplier or subcontracting part. We as a council discuss a lot of things, huge developments, outer loops, Toyota, Target development, and all those things that can have an impact on the opportunity to do business, significant impacts. And I think that's potentially an issue, or at least it is an issue for me. We just approved a local preference clause. What happens if a council person when a local council person or somebody we didn't address that, but are they eligible for that local preference clause? So you have those issues in the council approving local preference clauses potentially that can have a benefit, even if the council person abstains. Those are my concerns. The abstentions. I mean, I think that as a policy, the council should have several days, or at least a full day's notice on an abstention, so that we can be fully educated as to what we're getting ready to vote on. But it's not just about a sealed bid process. I have no doubt that the bids are done right, they're legal, and all those things. It's about what happens potentially after a bid is done. We were legal with how we were handling our expenses, but the situation in and of itself led to unfortunate circumstances by nature of the accountability that was set up. I am not particularly comfortable with having council people having be held accountable by staff. So those are relating to supplier and subcontractors, and my issue in no way. I have no problem whatsoever with a council person selling materials or providing work to somebody else who has a contract with the city. My only issue there was why I voted no. I wanted to be consistent until we could have this meeting, so that we could have this discussion. But also, the discussion needed to be how council participates in discussions that can have an impact on that ability to provide subcontracting or materials. And so those are my issues.
Tony, on the issue of the contractor doing business with the staff, that is typically gone through the engineer of record on the project. So you're held to the standard on that particular project by the engineer of record. The communication is contractor to engineer, engineer to owner. That's his responsibility. And as we've seen in the last 3 or 4 projects that come out, the city's not even inspecting those projects. The engineer themselves have hired inspectors as a service to the city of Temple. So you have a signed, sealed, stamped set of documents. Basically what that says is, engineer says, we've got this contractor, and we are going to provide you, Mr. City of Temple, what these plans say, and they're sealed, and we're putting our stamp on those. Okay? So we're not intermingling with staff. The only time that we intermingle with staff, not even through billings. Our billings go to the engineer. We don't even haggle with the city on our billings, our monthly estimates. They go to the engineer. The engineer checks our quantities, checks our monthly estimates.
The engineer being the city engineer?
No, the engineer being, let's say for the airport projects is KPA. We prepare our estimate, give it to KPA. They walk the project and they look at what we're billing for, what percentages of materials, bases, and all the different subcontractors that may be under the contractor's deal, and approve it or disapprove it, and say, well, you got too much, you don't have enough, or whatever. Then once that communication is done, then they present it to the city and say, we are saying that, Mr. City, that this work this month is done by that contractor. Okay? So there is no intermingling with staff in that situation.
Roads or anything?
No, nothing.
Every road we build has an outside engineer that manages it.
Not every road. Now, you take a subdivision that may be bid outside for an Omega or a Keeler or something. The city staff has inspectors that inspect for densities and those types of things and make sure it's being built by the plans. Okay. We don't even, at that point, we don't even put our estimates to the city staff. They go to the developer who's actually paying for the contract. So in that case, that contract's not even with the city, it's with the developer, and all responsibilities lie on the developer's hands. So on a city contract, the city and the inspectors aren't inspecting our work. You have outside independent testing agencies that is hired by the city and managed by the engineer of record, say KPA, that is out there on a daily basis and watches the contractor build a project as the plan is drawn and stamped. That way that engineer can provide this project over to the city. We approve it like it's stamped, and we're standing behind this as an engineer of record.
And those engineers, and we award projects to engineers all the time, lots of different ones. Those engineers are actually awarded the work by the council.
No, it's not. There are recommendations by the staff of the best engineer for each project that we have. Now, I could see a problem with an elected official said I was an engineer, or the mayor was an engineer. That is a service. So you're going to be hired based on not a dollar amount, but your references, how you do business, your qualifications. And I can see in that case where you might be have some extended favor, I guess you would say, because you're dealing directly with staff. I don't ever deal directly with staff, even the bidding process. The bidding process is public information. It's in the paper in Section 33 every Sunday morning. I go down through those things. You go buy a set of plans that the engineer has provided for the city of Temple. You purchase those plans. You bring them up, and all your questions. They have a pre-construction or pre-bid conference, which goes through the project that is held by the engineer with city staff listening. He presents the plan, asks for questions, and has a question timeline by X date. We will accept no more questions from this project. And after that timeline, from there to when it's bid, you're on your own. Okay? And you turn the bid in sealed. Everybody sits around the table. It's opened, and everybody sees the bid at the same time. Okay? So
I'm with you all the way to one point. I mean, the only issue after, because I had asked about how we use engineers and whether my concern is it's removing staff from the loop. That is important, and so if the engineering firm is handling all that, there's no interface. The only concern that I have then would be that we award a tremendous amount of work to engineers, and if there were some way to remove that point of failure in me, I would be comfortable.
Well, I mean, at that point, we're talking local people. We're talking local contractors, local engineers that we're trying to.
No, I understand. I'm not advocating that.
Engineers.
Is there an additional? But those are my concerns, and it's in relating to that and the supplier deal. In one of the things that I voted against, or actually voted for, because I had to, was the supplying of subcontracting and materials, and that my concern there is, as well as direct contracts, is, that should the individuals that are providing even those subcontracting things, how far out should discussions be able to be had? For instance, if Toyota coming to town is going to create a tremendous opportunity, a potential for whether it be direct contracts or subcontracting contracts or the supplying of materials, at what point should council people not be involved in those discussions?
Or what if there are bankers or attorneys on the council, and those bankers or attorneys potentially have the opportunity to do business with those particular companies when they move into town? Or if they have legal work that needs to be done, how do they know when that's done that firm might contract with them, and that they have the potential at some point in time in the future? Does everybody have to abstain from everything because they could potentially have to do business with them or potentially might have the capability of doing business with them at some point in time in the future? Take the current situation out of it and interject a hypothetical, which is exactly the same thing relative to the particular argument you're making now.
I understand that, and I guess.
So what you've got to do is then trust the integrity of people, and people.
This is not.
You can't take that out.
And Mayor, I have every opportunity when I talk to people or when I write about it in my blog and everything, and in having no way insinuate anything is or will happen. It is the gray that concerns me. And so, granted, your situation is real, and I guess, and one of the things I've advocated and visited with people about is maybe do an ethics commission, and maybe that's premature. Maybe what we do is we get a group of people together, and I think it's actually probably time, and do a charter review. It's been we've had 4 legislative sessions since the last one. The laws have changed. There's things we probably need to look at overall, but maybe we can just have independent people discuss this and see what comes out of it. I don't know exactly what the answer is. I have voted like I have voted and expressed it because it gives me concern.
You do two things. Let's hypothetically say we go back to the old way and prohibit those individuals from doing business with the city. You potentially then knock people out from being willing to serve that are very good people because they won't get themselves into a position where they can't conduct their business as a result of them being willing to step up and serve. And the other side of that is if they do want to serve, but then they say, okay, then I won't offer my services in the city and in here rather than a broad generic like an attorney or a bank, or you go to somebody like a Russell Schneider, who is one of few that would bid on small local jobs. When we have an airport or an outer loop project, we had 15 bidders on those. They came from all over. But you get a Sundance type of drainage project, those aren't large, they take high mobilization costs, so what you're going to do is get a few local bidders involved in that, and if you take out a high percentage by eliminating one particular one, the market is going to be impacted, and that's going to hurt the citizens of the city of Temple because you're going to take out a high quality supplier and somebody that helps to make the market by being a competitive bidder. And we know that Russell Schneider and his company, RT Schneider, has been through the bidding process, and they were the low bidder, and we see when we analyze the bids just how much money the city saved by doing business with that bidder. So take that bid out, and how much more money would we have spent, and potentially then how much even more would it be because we just took a major player out of the market, and that has a tendency to raise the market up.
Well, we just
so
approved
the ramifications are significant.
Agree, but we just approved the ability, we adopted a policy that gives us the ability to spend 5% more on multi-million-dollar all the way down.
Yep.
Is it always best to get the best deal at the sake of, my concerns are what they are.
Tony, I think what we need to do is
Russell Schneider, a local bidder. He lives in the city of Temple.
I'm not a local bidder.
He could very easily move his office to his house and be a local bidder.
No, I'd have to have a business, have to have a store.
Okay,
but
he could very easily open
sure,
it.
He could do his business to Temple.
And would be crazy not to take advantage of the local preference deal. It just wouldn't make sense as a council person.
At which point, we just got a lot of taxable value moved inside the city limits of the city of Temple.
The other thing, Tony, I think that we have to, make a decision. Or are we going to go by the rules that are set on our charter and vote that way? Or are we going to vote until if it's changed or amended or something? Because it's going to continue to be a convoluted mess if the mayor or I or Marty or you, if you go back in business, get a contract with the city. So, I quite understand why. If you meet all the recommendations, let's say, for instance, the neighborhood board. Okay, we passed that ordinance for you can develop a neighborhood board. What's it called? Code enforcement boards. Okay, I was against that. Okay, I voted against it. But it's now an ordinance. So when the first one comes up, I didn't vote against it because they met all the obligations and all the requirements to come together to create that code enforcement board. So I've got to look at those requirements and vote that way. So, you see what I'm saying? If we want to go by the rules today, I think we need to go by the rules today. If we need to change them, well, let's go change them.
I guess,
and
understand.
And if it's changed, the way government works, it's great. That's the way a system is supposed to work. But when you got a set of recommendations and you meet those recommendations,
that's why I voted yes.
No, you voted no, and the reason you voted yes the second time is because I abstained and you didn't know about it.
No, I did know about it. We had and that'd be interesting for people to watch. But
anyway,
that's one of my comments about why we need abstain. But I voted yes because I had I not known you were abstaining, I would have voted no, and then I would have opened the city up to legal issues.
Exactly.
But when I voted yes because we had to have the majority, we had to. point being, I having been on the last charter review committee, having been a part of that, we are in pretty much an unprecedented situation, at least in this community. And I don't think anybody, or at least I didn't, and the other people that were a part of that, I could be wrong, didn't envision millions and millions of dollars of work being directly awarded to a council person. And that's why maybe,
What percentage of that is my work, Tony? I mean, let's say someone gets a printing contract for $300,000 or $200,000 or $100,000. Okay? What percentage of that work do you do yourself, and what percentage of $1 million do I do myself? I'm going to venture to say a huge percentage, probably the majority of that, is sublet services to truck drivers, to material suppliers, to concrete suppliers, to steel suppliers. Sure. To striping and asphalt and on and on and on, and all we are is we orchestrate and supervise and put together a point person to do the project. Okay, and so it's not like when I get awarded $1 million contract, RT Schneider Construction Company is going to do $1 million worth of work. It means that we're going to do a small percentage of that work, and the majority of it is actually sublet services. And so, but if we want to change the charter, we need to change the charter and go by those rules.
And
that's my only deal.
I am telling you guys, and have voted accordingly now, to where I am uncomfortable. I am not even advocating that the charter be changed. I think that it would make sense to have a charter review committee to look at this and numerous other issues. I agree in the sense of this is a forum I have been wanting to have. I appreciate the opportunity to have it. I've expressed my concerns. I am working through those concerns in several different ways and trying to get comfortable with where we're at.
Well, the drainage channel, when it came up to bid the first time that it was tabled, you basically said, I'm voting no. So if the mayor and I was abstaining, that job would have been thrown to the wind or removed or whatever.
It just wouldn't have passed.
It wouldn't have passed, and then you'd have had to say whatever. Okay? Because you basically said that during the meeting, correct?
And that's correct. And that's
why it was tabled. And that's why the mayor said, okay, what I'll do, I'll not sell you material, Mr. Schneider, so I'm going to Clean Texas to buy my material for that specific project in order for him not to abstain. So you can vote no and pass the project because of no factual reason, in my opinion, that meets up to what the rule is set for where we're supposed to evaluate that particular item. And so, I don't guess I understood why that particular project you was willing to go cancel it because it wouldn't pass. But now, the larger project that the mayor and I both were going to be a sublet service on, you're not willing to do that. That didn't make sense to me.
Like I said, that was more studying, wanting to be consistent in where I stood until we had this discussion. And I did not want to give the appearances or confuse what my issues were or give the appearances that I was being inconsistent until we had this opportunity to have this discussion. The issues are, I have no issue whatsoever with the mayor supplying materials, you acting as a subcontractor. My only concern is at what point should the discussions, should there be not direct, that's where I am concerned. When you start talking about very large projects that can have a direct impact on your business, whether it's, that's a concern. And so.
But how could the mayor or I or Marty or whoever benefit from having those discussions on a large project? Because they're not specific in the means of how they're built or how can you be more competitive. I mean,
good question.
All those plans are basically black and white on the ground. You know what I'm saying?
Well, but you create opportunity. I mean, as a council, part of what we vote on a regular basis. We looked at an airport master plan today. That if we end up approving that and we end up working towards that goal, we will spend $100 million out of that airport. That will, in all likelihood, reasonably it's safe to assume, not absolute, will benefit both of y'all's businesses. potentially significantly. The question is, should you vote for the approval of that master plan or not? Maybe those are the discussions that, it's not as much the fact that you are a subcontractor or a supplier. It's when do you cross that line? That's the fact that you are one of a handful of people who are going to mess with Sundance. Well, maybe Sundance, that should be a discussion you might not should be involved in. You might say, you know what, I'm potentially going to get this work. I should not be involved in this discussion.
I don't think there was any discussion on Sundance.
Well, but those projects come up a lot. We plan out, we talk about these things, and whether it's detention ponds, drainage channels, small roads, whatever those things, I think those are the things that we need to further, because I would much rather err on the side of transparency and the fact with the people who are looking, in light of the recent events especially, and so those are my issues with that. And so what do we as a council decide is the right thing? I agree, Mayor. Potentially, yeah. You may voting on something that may or may not have an impact. That's different. But when it's a reasonable to assume that it directly will have an impact on your bottom line, I think maybe that's when at that point that becomes a very real potential that maybe that's when the stepping out of the discussion. Mayor was not involved in our discussions with Target at all because they had potentially a potential impact on his property. And I think that was right. It was
a real property that he was dealing with, and the Target were encompassed. The way I understood it, they were wanting to purchase that property along with the other property which we were given incentives to.
Sure, he abstained from that.
You bet, because he's in direct conflict.
As a single source supplier for this. Maybe, should he be involved in it if that wasn't it, just because he'd probably be supplying all the raw materials for it? And that's my question. That's why it's not any fact that it's not the issue of whether he's supplying it, but at what point should he recuse himself from the discussion of voting on things that could very realistically have an impact? You as well. The subcontracting and supplying, I do not have a problem with. It is at what point for the appearance of the community, should that be stepped back? You have to abstain. That's the law.
Sure.
But
as it relates to something that we know we're
going to
absolutely
get.
But should there be
how
discussion?
far back do you go with it?
That's my question. Those are some of the things that I am trying to sort through, and these are things these are questions that people ask me. These are I didn't even necessarily put all this together with you supplying the materials until recently. I'm voting first. We have not made it a practice, which I think was a mistake, and we will do in the future. I'm hoping that we will give plenty of notice on abstention so we can know what's going on. But, a lot of times we would vote and wouldn't know somebody was abstaining until they actually voted. Me voting first,
what does that have to do with your vote?
Because
if I abstain or
Russell,
not.
if I would not have known you were abstaining, I would have voted no, and we would have had a problem.
Okay, but
based
off of what, though?
So why does abstaining make a difference?
Why does my abstaining on anything make a difference the way you're going to vote?
Against it or you're
not. You're either against it, or you can't be in between.
I was told by Jonathan that we cannot. I had to vote yes, or we would have put the city at legal risk.
Right.
So what good would that have been? I made my point. I said I don't want to do this, but I'm doing it so not to put the city and myself, I was informed, at risk. So I don't want to vote on anything I am not fully informed on. I want to know what I'm voting on.
Well, you ask.
And I did.
Call me.
And I did, if you remember.
And
I said, Clyde, is anybody abstaining? Well, I don't know. He won't tell me. Russell, you're abstaining. Why? Is it going to affect your vote? Well, Russell, it might. Don't you remember?
Right.
And it's be fun to watch on TV for the public out there. But
but you got a whole week to call and find out all those items and get your information before you come in.
I think the city secretary ought to be notified in advance if somebody's going to abstain from a vote, and that information should be distributed.
Well, my form was filled out laying right here before I abstained. It was filled out and signed.
And nobody at this dais knew, but you.
No,
David looked over your shoulder. So.
He asked me prior to when I signed it.
Okay.
So.
Those are my
is that
issues.
the rule? If that's the rule, again,
we can whip it all day long. Those are my issues for the benefit of you guys and everybody else. I think we ought to. I think there ought to be serious consideration that we put a charter review together, not just for this issue, but like I said, it is good practice, especially in light of having 4 legislative sessions since the last one, to look at things and how changes that that have been made in Austin have an impact on our charter. That's
the legislature last session put in more restrictive requirements dealing with conflict of interest, and requires a council member or public official, whether it's a board member, council member, whatever, to list potential suppliers that they will deal with that could be doing business with the city, that they do business with. And we went through a fairly significant training.
About a year and a half, yeah. Let me ask you a question. If I mean, again, to know what we're dealing, if it's changed, I mean, it's going to probably affect all the boards that are city appointed, correct?
Well, I'm not saying anything that they have done will change this specific situation. I'm saying that a charter review committee would make sense to study this issue as well as other issues that might have come up during legislative sessions that might need to be looked at. That's what I'm saying. That's all. So, I mean, and I am one of 5. And so, if nobody else shares that concern, then that's the way the system works. I understand. But that is just that, it is what it is, and we can agree to disagree, and I will continue to work through this and have discussions with you guys and other folks. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion, though.
Sure, I do too.
I really do. And I think that you have educated me, Russell, and I am still working through it. So
and I'll tell you, as a contractor, I do not want any unfair treatment of any kind from any owner. I mean, because we have to go by the letter of law, those documents of those, and if we don't, the engineer is saying, you're building what I'm stamping, and if you're not building what I'm stamping, I can't say to my customer that here's a stamped or approved subdivision or road or whatever you're building. And we want it that way. And
guys, I am not implying anything has or will happen.
Right.
I
understand.
I think at the end of the day, the most important thing, one of the things that we have to safeguard, is the integrity of this council as a whole, and that people. And I think we have had a few setbacks or at least one setback in the recent days that has caused some people to question that. And I think I am much more amenable to erring on the side of transparency for the benefit of the voter. So this has been a good discussion, and we can continue this individually as well as discuss this charter stuff. So, man.
One final point I'd like to make relates back again to the direct interaction, particularly on the expense issue or the reimbursement issue, where we wanted to take our direct reports from being our approving authority, differing from those who might be inspecting projects on behalf of the city who report to others other than our direct reports, and to our direct reports, but not to us directly. That being really a pretty different situation. And so far removed that they have responsibilities and professionalism that...
I totally agree with you, Mayor, and I think we have a great staff. My concern is why creating situations that create uncomfortable situations, whether how many levels below. I mean, nobody wants to. You really, I mean, whether it's me at work or whoever else. I mean, and you want to tread lightly when dealing with your employer at whatever level. And I think that there's a potential uncomfortable situation, whether it's that or other things. I think, and we as council people have all experienced it in dealing with lower level folks. We have to try to do our best to continue to reiterate. I'm a citizen. Treat me the same way, because they're just, it's human nature, and so that concerns me. But I appreciate your distinction.
And also, John, I would add that every project has not been treated with an outside inspection. There have been projects, I would say 3 or 4 years ago, I can think of 1 or 2 that they did not hire that specific engineer to do the inspection. So it has been also in the past a city inspector inspecting that project for the plan that the engineer drew as well.
That was what I thought was the common practice.
Well, it's been mix and match, but I would say over the last maybe couple years, it's turned to where the engineers inspecting the project, and the bills are going directly to them and that kind of deal.
Is that included in the scope of the engineering agreements that we signed from now?
I think you'll see on some of the deals we approve, it says that the services for inspections and
Sometimes not in the initial. Recently, we've come back and added that into the scope of work in different projects, whether it's water projects, water treatment facility projects, where they've done the initial engineering, and then after we've awarded the bid, we then came back and modified their contract to then put them as the inspecting engineers and oversight engineers throughout the course of the project.
Which is a very, very smart thing, because he's inspecting the work that he drew on paper, and he's handing over a project inspected by him and drawn by him, saying this is what you're getting. So it's a
When the
pretty
project is over with, his professional certification is on the line, that in fact it was built as he engineered it.
That service that we've been bringing back is commonly referred to it as on-site representation. The contracts we amend for that. I think that's a practice that Bruce has brought on board too, to have that third-party representation.
So fairly
And we
fairly
approved
new.
an item tonight that the on-site representation was responsible for the oversight that caused us to do a change order that returned $91,000 to the city of Temple.
I have a question of Jonathan. Are we in violation of the law on any of this?
No, I don't think we are. In fact, I think one of the hypotheticals that we talked about, the problem is when you have a charter, and ours is pretty ordinary in that respect, pretty common, that allows a council member to participate in a competitive bidding situation. The problem you've got is once you have that bid in, if they choose to bid on that, if in fact they are the lowest responsible bidder, they've got a bid that meets specifications, and they are a responsible bidder. By law, we're required to either reject all the bids, just start over and not do the project, or award it to the lowest responsible bidder. You don't really have an opportunity to say, well, I don't feel good about this, and when we've talked about this, and go to the second bidder, because you'd be violating state law to do that. So, we're following the practice. The legislature created enabling authority to say, cities, you can do this, and I think it's kind of interesting, and they chose to do it only for local governments, because if you think about it, the kind of further down in government you go, the harder it is to get. You got smaller communities, smaller base of contractors. The harder it is to get people to run for office, or the fewer options you have about who you're going to hire. And they chose to do that to eliminate or preempt the common law just at the local government level. They said, with this safeguard, we think if you require that they abstain from the discussion or voting on that item and use competitive bidding, that we're going to create an exception to that common law principle. So, I think we're following the law. The voters approved that change. The state authorized it. As long as that is the law, we have to follow that, and I think we're following it. Now, it's clear the state law also says that cities, if they think that that's not a good principle, you can amend your charter, or you can even do it by ordinance. You can make it more restrictive, but we are following the law as it's written now, that our voters approved and the legislature authorized.
In the 18 years since that charter amendment was put in place, has there been any violations of it that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of any.
I would expect nothing else, John.
Well,
That's his job.
So maybe there isn't a problem.
Well, Marty, I'm saying that's my point. Is I'm not saying there is a problem. I'm saying I'm concerned. I've been informed that there was nothing illegal with the expense stuff either, but we ended up with an unfortunate situation. So that's my issue. It's not the fact that laws are being broken, that it's, we get into these areas that were completely legal, but that, and they've said that we were legal with the other situation, but yet it didn't turn out good. And so that's, and
Well,
I
but the
think
transparency and the public disclosure took care of it all, though, didn't it?
it is in the process. It did take care of it. Hopefully, are addressing it and setting the things into place will mend that public trust, and this is a part of that as well. So your point's taken.
I mean, two last things. You made a comment that I didn't want anybody to misconstrue that I'm a sole supplier. For the product that I sell, I am far from a sole supplier. There are other sources of material available. And for the point of clarification, typically I don't bid to the city. And there is probably only one instance where the company that I own does a direct bid to the city, and that's if the city requests bids for material. Typically, I'm not bidding any of the projects that I've abstained from to the city.
You're a supplier.
I've abstained because I was a supplier to the winning contractor, whether it was Mr. Schneider or any other contractor that I have been supplying. That's an item that we're bidding on. And as far as the magnitude of what I supply to the entire project, it's a very small percentage. But it's enough that what I'm trying to do is to point out that I am supplying material on a particular project, and I'm not trying to distinguish how much is significant or not significant. I'm just abstaining on it because I've been informed that if that person got that bid, that my company would be have a higher degree of chance of getting that material because I bid that to them when they bid that job. So
you're saying
I'm an indirect
So you don't even
supplier.
know. You're saying you don't even know if you've got the work when we're voting.
No, I'll typically know because I'll ask.
Okay.
All right. If I see a project, I'll find out, did we bid that material? Because I personally don't bid them. I have somebody in my company that does that. But I will ask if in fact, if Mr. Schneider got that project for Sundance, I said, am I supplying material to that, on that? And he said, yeah, I got a bid from you, and that was part of my bid. And I said, okay, fine, I need to abstain then. And the same with the contract that went to Purser and
Dixon.
Killeen and Ed Dixon for airport. So Parkway.
Winland.
So, yeah, Winland, right. So,
I understand.
So, anyways, whatever they are, there's a bunch of.
He is a little bit high on his material, but we won't go there.
I'm not the cheapest.
Very good.
Anyways, any further discussion? Thank you for the discussion, Council. I agree with Mr. Jeter. In light of some of the issues that have come up, it is good for us to make sure we have this dialogue and discussion. Mr. Graham, thank you for the preparation and putting this together for us and moving us through this. Anything else, Council, staff? That was the last item on our agenda tonight. It is not an action item. It was merely a discussion item. And thank you for being with us this evening. And thank you for your attendance at Temple City Council. We are adjourned.